The lights of the global summit blaze against polished marble and restless faces. Cameras blink like restless eyes. At the center of it all, George Soros leans back in his chair, his expression carrying that faint, knowing smirk of a man used to owning the room. His words still hang in the air, measured, polite, and cutting enough to draw a murmur from the crowd. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett sits motionless, her hands folded, her gaze steady. The moderator hesitates, uncertain whether to step in or let the silence breathe. Reporters lift their phones. 1,000 red dots blink alive. Somewhere in the back, someone whispers her name like a spark in a room full of gas. Crockett inhales slowly. Every sound sharpens, the click of a camera, the flutter of a notepad, the hush of a world waiting to see whether she'll break or blaze. Soros glances down, tapping a pen against his notes, a gesture so casual it borders on condescension. And then she looks up, eyes clear, voice ready to cut through the noise. What came out of her mouth next would echo far beyond that conference stage. Just 24 hours earlier, the invitation to the Global Leadership Forum had been framed as an honor, an opportunity for dialogue across generations. But the moment Jasmine Crockett's name appeared beside George Soros's on the program, it became something else entirely. The press called it a collision course, the clash of worlds. One man commanding the machinery of influence, one woman channeling the raw voice of communities
long ignored. In the glossy corridors of the hotel, journalists whispered like gamblers placing bets. Could a first-term congresswoman hold her ground against a billionaire whose shadow touched governments and markets alike? Hashtags were already trending before she even stepped onto the plane. Hashtag Power vs. People. Hashtag The Texas Voice. By morning, the stage lights became a metaphor for the imbalance itself.
Soros arrived surrounded by aides, his confidence unshaken, his every gesture suggesting control of the narrative. Crockett walked in alone, no entourage, just that slow, deliberate stride that said she wasn't here to play defense. Viewers at home felt the tension bleeding through their screens, the establishment versus the embodiment of earned grit. This wasn't just a debate. It was a test of whose truth the world would recognize when the microphones went live. Few in the audience knew that she'd been preparing for this moment her entire life. For decades, George Soros had been the name whispered in the marble halls of power. To some, he was the architect of progress. To others, the puppeteer behind the curtain. His fortune stretched across continents, threading through banks, foundations, and governments like an invisible current. He was a man who could tilt markets with a sentence and shift the direction of nations with a signature. The world called him a financier, but those who'd met him knew he dealt not only in money, but in influence. The camera lingers on him now, seated beneath the gleam of chandeliers, his hands folded with the quiet confidence of someone who has seen history bend before him. Every movement is deliberate. The half-smile he wears isn't arrogance in the crude sense. It's the serene patience of a man who believes he has already won. His tone is calm, almost paternal when he speaks about global stability and responsible leadership. Yet beneath those polished words lies something colder, the conviction that the world functions best when guided by people like him. To the crowd, Soros radiates control. He listens with polite detachment, eyes flicking between speakers, his mind already categorizing, assessing, predicting outcomes before they unfold. This is his domain, a summit built on diplomacy and discretion, where the powerful exchange ideals like currency, and applause follows the highest donor. The air itself seems to bend toward him, drawn by the gravity of wealth and reputation. And yet, for all his composure, there's an invisible thread of irony weaving through the moment. He doesn't see the undercurrent building, the quiet unrest outside those polished doors, the millions watching online who no longer trust men who speak of fairness from penthouses. He doesn't see the woman seated across from him, representing everything that money cannot purchase: authenticity, empathy, and the grounded voice of those who rise without privilege. As he smooths the edge of his cuff and leans forward to offer his critique, Soros believes he's guiding the conversation. The audience believes it too, but history has a way of turning its lens toward those who least expect it. His calm gaze meets hers across the stage, one shaped by centuries of power, the other by generations of struggle. And for a heartbeat, time seems to pause. The cameras flash. The moderator nods for her to respond. Soros reclines slightly, certain of the script he's written in his mind. But his confidence would meet something he didn't anticipate: conviction, sharper than wealth. Long before the stage lights and cameras, Jasmine Crockett's story began beneath the hum of Texas heat and the quiet persistence of people who built their lives from nothing. She grew up watching her community fight for fairness in small, invisible ways: neighbors standing up to landlords, teachers buying supplies out of their own paychecks, parents working double shifts just to keep dignity intact. Those moments carved her belief that justice wasn't an institution, it was an instinct. In law school, she was the one who stayed after class, not for extra credit, but to help others make sense of the chaos buried in legal texts. When classmates angled for prestige firms, she went home to a stack of pro bono files, defending tenants who couldn't afford counsel and activists who refused to be silenced. She learned early that fighting for the voiceless rarely came with applause. It came with exhausted skepticism and the ever-present question: is it worth it? She answered that question in courtrooms where the odds were never in her favor. There, under flickering fluorescent lights, she stood against prosecutors who dismissed her clients' hopeless cases. Each verdict, each hard-earned victory became part of her armor. Integrity wasn't her strategy, it was her survival. When she ran for Congress, they said she didn't have the donors, the machine, or the polish that wins campaigns. She had something else, a story people recognized as their own. Her speeches were less about policy than presence, the audacity to stand tall and say, "We belong here too." Every vote she earned came from that resonance, that unshakable sense of shared struggle. And now, as she sits across from Soros in the blinding light of the global stage, those memories hum beneath her car. The sweat of courtrooms, the late nights writing motions by hand, the faces of clients who said thank you with tears instead of words, they all converge into this single, poised moment. To the world she looks serene, but inside she carries the pulse of 1,000 untold stories, the weight of communities that never make headlines. Power, to her, was never about dominance. It was about duty, the moral responsibility to rise so others could see the path was possible. And now, in front of the world, she was about to show exactly why her journey mattered. The room had shifted. The polite veneer of diplomacy thinned as Soros leaned forward, his voice smooth but edged with condescension. "Congresswoman," he began, "while I admire your passion, idealism can be limiting. Governance requires understanding the complexities beyond emotion." His words were velvet-wrapped steel, calculated, patronizing, designed to draw blood without raising his tone. A murmur rippled through the audience. Some nodded, reassured by his poise. Others stiffened, sensing the sting beneath his civility. The moderator glanced nervously between them, unsure whether to intervene or let history play itself out. Crockett said nothing. Her hands rested on the table, still as stone. She let his words hang in the air, let the silence grow uncomfortable. "Stay calm. Speak truth. Remember who you are. She could feel her pulse steadying, each beat a drum of composure. Soros tilted his head, misreading her restraint as concession. We must avoid simplifying complex realities into moral absolutes. The world is not so easily divided into villains and heroes. A few scattered claps broke the tension, the kind of applause that sounded more like relief than agreement. The camera lights brightened. The world was watching to see if she would retreat or rise. Crockett lifted her eyes, and the movement alone seemed to still the air. She looked neither angry nor intimidated, only deliberate, as though weighing not just her words, but their place in history. Behind her calm, the memories of courtrooms and campaign trails flickered, the voices that told her she wasn't enough, the quiet victories no one televised. The silence before her reply felt endless, like the moment before a verdict. Soros leaned back, certain the point was his. Then, with one breath, she turned the entire conversation upside down. Crockett's voice broke the silence like a clean crack of thunder. Not loud, not angry, controlled. You talk about complexity, she began, her tone almost conversational. But I've lived it. The kind of complexity that doesn't come with think tanks or billion-dollar safety nets. The audience stilled. Even the camera operators froze mid-motion. I come from a place where policy isn't theory. It's the reason a child eats or goes hungry, where the consequences of decisions made in rooms like this land on people who'll never be invited inside them. She paused, eyes steady on Soros. So forgive me if my idealism sounds inconvenient. It's not emotion, it's experience. Gasps scattered through the crowd. A few claps, tentative at first, echoed against the stage. Soros's smile faltered, subtle but visible. The kind of flicker that cameras catch and magnify 1,000 times. He adjusted his glasses, leaning forward as if preparing to respond, but she wasn't finished. You say the world can't be divided into villains and heroes? You're right. It's divided by something else. Those who see people as numbers and those who see them as stories worth fighting for. Applause began to swell, cutting through the tension like a rising wave. She didn't acknowledge it. She let the sound wash around her, then continued with surgical calm. For years, people like me have been told to be patient, to learn the rules before we question who wrote them. But power that demands silence isn't leadership. It's fear disguised as wisdom. She turned slightly, addressing not just Soros, but the entire audience. If governance means losing sight of humanity, then maybe it's not governance we need to protect. It's our capacity to care. The applause broke into cheers. Phones rose like a forest of screens. Hashtags were already being born in that moment. Soros sat perfectly still, his pen unmoving, his expression hard to read, but no longer relaxed. Crockett leaned forward, her tones softening to something almost intimate. You've spent your life investing in systems. I've spent mine investing in people. And every time someone underestimates that difference, they remind me why I'm here. The cheers turned thunderous now. The moderator, visibly stunned, half smiled, unsure whether to regain order or let history unfold. She delivered the final blow with grace, not fury. The truth is, Mr. Soros, leadership isn't measured by how many nations you've influenced. It's measured by how many people you've lifted without expecting anything in return. Silence fell, that rare electric silence that only follows truth spoken plainly. Soros exhaled, his gaze lowering for the first time that evening. Crockett didn't gloat. She simply nodded, as if sealing something inevitable. The audience, the journalists, even the critics online who came ready to dismiss her, all of them felt it, the shift, the sense that something had been realigned. And in that moment, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a politician answering a challenge. She was the embodiment of an idea that couldn't be bought or silenced. But as her words went viral, no one expected the aftershocks that followed worldwide. The world woke up to her words, Social media feeds exploded like fireworks. Hashtag Texas Voice, hashtag Truth to Power, hashtag Jasmine Crockett, all trending within hours. Clips of her measured, piercing rebuttal stitched together by fans and journalists alike, overlaid with captions like, "She said what we've all been thinking," and, finally, "Someone who speaks for us." In living rooms and coffee shops across continents, people replayed the moment, sharing it with friends, colleagues, strangers, anyone who needed to feel that justice, even briefly, had found its stage. News outlets ran morning segments, splitting screens between her poised expression and Soros's now subtle unease. Pundits debated, some praising her courage, others grudgingly acknowledging the precision of her words. One political commentator tweeted, "In 60 seconds, she did what years of protest couldn't, remind us all that leadership belongs to the people, not the powerful." Another posted a stitched video showing her court victories, campaign speeches, and conference clip back to back, a cinematic reminder of a journey many had followed from the start. Celebrities, writers, and activists jumped into the digital chorus. A musician captioned a clip, "This is the energy we need, truth without compromise." A late-night host replayed her rebuttal for emphasis, pausing mid-clip to repeat, "Listen to her, pay attention." The applause from the conference hall was now mirrored by millions in virtual spaces, a wave swelling beyond the boundaries of the summit itself. Yet amid the euphoria, there was unease in the halls of power. Advisors whispered, analysts recalculated influence. Those accustomed to controlling narratives felt the ground shift under them, subtle but undeniable. Even the most composed observers noted the rare combination of intellect, poise, and moral clarity Crockett had wielded, a force that could not be manipulated by position or money. The ripple effect was visible everywhere. Advocacy groups cited her clip in statements, student organizations shared it in solidarity, and online forums dissected every phrase, every inflection, as though she had rewritten the rules of engagement in real time. Every share, every retweet, every stitch video added to the crescendo and digital anthem for a world hungry for voices unafraid to speak truth. And yet beneath the viral noise, a deeper message was emerging, one that transcended politics. The energy of the conference lingered, but now the world was quieter, listening. Crockett's words floated over images of communities across cities and continents, faces of every color, every creed, standing, working, dreaming. Her voice was calm, reflective, carrying the weight of experience and the clarity of purpose. "This moment isn't about one confrontation," she said. "It's about the principle that truth matters, that representation matters, and that integrity is more powerful than influence." She spoke of the people who had shaped her journey, the neighbors who held together communities when no one else would, the activists who refused to stay silent, the families who sacrificed so the next generation could rise. "Leadership," she continued, "isn't about proving dominance. It's about lifting others, making sure voices long ignored are finally heard. That is the real measure of power." Across screens, across borders, her message resonated. It was no longer a single moment in a conference hall. It became a lesson in courage, in the quiet strength that refuses to yield, in the dignity that outlasts arrogance. People saw themselves in her calm resolve, in the idea that one voice, when steady, principled, and fearless, can ripple through systems thought untouchable. Crockett didn't frame it as a personal victory. She framed it as a collective one, a testament to those who had long been underestimated, dismissed, or overlooked. "When we speak with honesty," she said, "when we act with integrity, we change not just conversations, but expectations. We remind the world that justice and empathy are not optional, they are essential." The montage of applause, smiles, and quiet nods faded, leaving a sense of possibility in its wake. The camera lingered on faces reflecting hope, determination, and the belief that leadership could be redefined. And as applause faded, one thought lingered in every heart. Maybe, just maybe, a new era of leadership had begun. The moment between George Soros and Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a headline, and it wasn't just a clip circulating online. It was a statement, a reminder that courage, clarity, and conviction can shift the conversation, even when faced with towering influence. Across conference halls, living rooms, and digital feeds, her words reverberated, proving that integrity has a power all its own.
When truth speaks with grace, even empires listen. And in that listening, the world remembers what leadership should feel like. Accountable, empathetic, and rooted in the dignity of every person it serves. If you were moved, inspired, or reminded of the strength in standing firm, share this moment. Subscribe, join the conversation, and carry forward the values that make change possible.
Every voice matters, and together we shape the future we believe in.